All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Winters and Winters interview, edition number, I don't know, actually, so that's fine. But we are really enjoying having these ongoing touch points. So I have with me again, of course, Dan Winters, Head of Americas with GRESB. And then I also have joining with us today, Chris Laughman, so VP of Sustainability at Conservice, which should be a potential known name in multiple areas, but maybe with some of the recent splash that the Goby plus Conservice has had. So we'll dive into that. But we're also excited to have Chris joining us from his experience working at Greystar previously as their Director of Sustainability. So first of all, welcome Chris to our Winters and Winters interview. That's a mouthful.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I thought first we'd maybe start off with, this is our first conversation of the Conservice plus the Goby news. So those of you who haven't seen it or heard of it, which is doubtful, hopefully at this point, but Conservice recently acquired Goby and we couldn't be more thrilled. So Chris, you were obviously a huge part of that. And I would love just for you to give a brief overview on Conservice and the why and what that brings to the table and how that's impactful for GRESB participants as well.
Sure. And thank you again. Honestly, this kind of boils down to a little bit of the DNA of both organizations. Truly, if there was a match that was meant to be, the cultures of the two organizations, it's just incredible the way the gel that happens between both. Conservice has always tried to build themselves as the utility experts. And the thing that I think that's important about if you're an expert at utilities, there's a bill, right? This bill comes in and this bill has two sides. It has a cost side and it has a consumption side. And we have really obviously focused on and gotten very proficient on the cost side. Now we're looking at that consumption side. And we're really trying to figure out where can we leverage the single source of truth at the bill itself and recognize where our opportunities are for improvement. We can use the same source of truth for our certifications and for verifications, and then also for reporting mechanisms such as GRESB. So really by having that single seamless source, how many times do you have to go to 15 different places to get data? So if we're able to go to one source, one throat to choke, so to speak, one hand high five. Having that single point works really, really well and really gives us a lot of ability to have insight into that performance. So super excited with our data. Goby's already proven proficiency in GRESB. I just can't wait to see what the future holds.
Yeah, I can't agree anymore. I think it's, from our perspective, Conservice has been wonderful. We're excited to be a part of the family. But what's interesting is that, what we've already focused on, which we agree with, and I think GRESB was one of the first to really lead the stage in terms of, no, you need insights into this data. You have to pay attention to it for multiple reasons. But we would acquire the bill, process it, and utilize it for ESG. And then we were like, that's all we're doing with the bill. Where now, you were our missing link, I'd like to think maybe we were your missing link. And so really love this idea of taking the bill, the source, right, and getting it through everything you need to do with that bill, because it's still important, and then getting it all the way into utilizing it from driving performance, driving changes, and then carrying it to the conversation to the boardroom, right? Utilizing that data set for different frameworks like GRESB to then be able to communicate that really effectively back with investors. And so super excited about it. I'm glad we were able to talk about it. Glad to have you on the call for today, because I think you bring insights from both the client side through your Greystar days, but then also the vendor side through the Conservice end of it. But with that, actually, honestly, Dan, I hope things like this are exciting to you. I really think that GRESB was one of the things that continued to push things like this acquisition forward, to be honest, because Conservice was getting so many conversations and calls from their clients of you have my bill, can you please use it for GRESB? And so I think part of that is because of organizations like GRESB. So hopefully something like that's exciting for you to start to see come together too.
Well, I love what Chris said, right? He talked about the two sides of the coin. There's the dollar side, and then there's the consumption side. So when I think about the dollar side, we've been trafficking in financial data since the 34 Act, right? It's roughly 80 years. And we've continued to refine. And then this thing called Lotus 123 came about, and it helped with the spreadsheets and Excel and all of the things. So we're off to the races. And the financial side is pretty, there's a lot of rules and it's very robust. Non-financial data is much less, there's less of a track record. So GRESB was the original due diligence questionnaire when it comes to ESG. Thinking about from an institutional perspective, what are fund managers, what are listed property companies doing when it comes to structured non-financial data. So in real estate, there's the big four: energy, water, waste, greenhouse gas emission data. I'm not talking about the accounting firms on the one side. I'm talking about the big four issues that we can track. So that's where the consumption comes into play. When GRESB was formed in 2009 and the initial benchmark created in 2010, organizations were like, wait a second, you want what? I might be able to get you that spend, but no way do I have any process to get and acquire that consumption data. But some did. They were using Energy Star. Maybe there was some smart metering happening. And so leaders emerged. And in 2011, 12, 13, it was recognized by the industry that, hey, this is a problem, but we can solve it. We're seeing that organizations are. And so what GRESB is, it's that pull effect to come on along. Other organizations can figure this out. You can too, because there's business value here. Understanding which properties are doing great and which properties are not allows focus to happen down here. And maybe there's some OpEx pull, some things that are happening that people can coach and pull these people up. Sometimes there's CapEx improvements that need to happen. Either way, the focus is on those issues, that non-financial data, and being able to report that out becomes a nice client servicing issue, because there are institutional investors that want to do carbon footprint reports. They put a line in the sand and they say, okay, we understand where our real estate portfolio is writ large, because we've got a lot of positions out there. We want a reduction, 20, 30, 50%. Some of the Netherlands funds have said 50% reduction in our institutional portfolio. How does that happen? The only way it does is with focus on these issues. I love what's happening between the two groups.
Well, like you said,
I'm just going to add to that real quick. I mean, I think we continue to get closer and closer to the source of that data. So before, like Michelle was kind of framing, we had to go figure out how to get that data and where to get it. Now that utility billing companies are getting involved, we're getting closer and closer to the actual utility biller. We're talking to, a lot of times we're able to interact with these utility companies in ways that others are not. So really we're trying to, because one of the biggest challenges with GRESB, obviously, or with any reporting mechanism for that matter, even for opportunity identification, is getting the data coverage. And while it's certainly been helped out with benchmarking ordinances and increased regulations in certain parts of the country, there are large swaths of the country that just don't have those type of requirements. So it takes a little bit more out of the box thinking to try to figure out, well, how can I get bills in San Antonio, Texas, where there's not a regulation and where it's completely tenant billed. So I don't necessarily have that contractual relationship between the utility company and the tenant to get that data. Sometimes out of the box solutions can come from a little bit closer relationship to the utility company. So we're hoping to kind of bring that closer to the utility company relationship, along with the proficiency, like I said, of that Goby already had, merge that into a platform that is truly a build a boardroom solution for those stakeholders at the end of the day.
Okay.
Well, speaking of the data, and I think that push with that data, there's some cool GRESB data that came out today, something about some results. I don't know, we might have been sitting by the phones or the computers. Sounds like we had a pretty cool year. I have some cool stats in front of me.
Michelle, we don't know what filming this is. This is version 8, 9, 10, but I do know what the date is today. It's October 1st. And I know we're recording it. People will watch this later. But October 1st is a magical day in the cycle. April 1st is when the assessment opens. On July 1st, it closes. We validate the data. Everyone comes in and takes a look at it. And in September and October 1, benchmark reports are published. People see their results. Confetti falls from the ceiling for some. For others, it's like, okay, we've got a little work to do. There are a few who are in the GRESB stages of grief. Shock, anger, sadness, bargaining. I get it, right? That's usually the first year. But what's great about benchmarking is it gets organizations out of their four walls and they can see, okay, you know, we took a step forward. We're understanding that these issues are real and our peers have moved forward because we don't offer the solutions to the market. It's really what Chris has been talking about. You know, it's okay, we have the San Antonio problem. We cannot acquire this data. How can we solve it? Let's be creative. And so GRESB is the mechanism to put a little fire to drive through inertia and organizational, where you have to silo bust a little bit in order to get some progress. And now today is that day where people receive their scores, and it's a good story. So how did you guys? I mean, what happened with your clients?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, by way of some fun statistics, so, well, just on the GRESB side, so we saw that you guys did another like 26% increase from last year to this year, which I think is amazing. Each year we're like, you and I, Dan, we're both like, are we going to get more? Like, where there's more, right? Maybe 26% in terms of the increase across GRESB, which I thought was amazing. On the Goby side, we were super excited. So we had nearly 100% of our clients on increase in their GRESB score, which is just like amazing. To your point, there's always going to be a little bit of GRESB grief, or there's always that comparison standpoint that you're going to have with your peers, and you're always looking to do better. But that to us is like really exciting to see that happen with our clients. We're really happy to be part of that. And I think, so I'm excited for this to maybe be the next point that we take the conversation. I think the differentiator of how we think about GRESB is that it's year long. Even though you have your April 1, July 1, October 1 dates, it really is a continuous process. Yes, we got the results out today, but we were already thinking as soon as, July 2nd or maybe July 7th, because between July 1st and July 7th, the entire office goes on vacation. But we're already thinking, okay, what are some additional components that we can start working towards? So curious, Chris, I might actually lend it to you first of your thoughts of that, because you came from that Greystar side, but also, again, you're seeing it from the vendor side. Do you see the same thing? Where do you see the most impact?
Sure. And honestly, now that I'm on the Conservice side, I get to talk to so many more property managers and owners, asset owners. So honestly, the impact of that is just amplified, but it's still the same processes, right? It's still the same cadence. But while I think it's awesome, today is the day that we all like to do the high fives and let the confetti fall. But, and that's great to see how you compare against peers. But honestly, sustainability is a journey and we're all at different places. And what GRESB offers is kind of like the lines in a coloring book in my mind, because it helps keep me on track to what I should be. So if I can use GRESB as like a cadence for the year, and there's certain things I need to be doing throughout the year in order to improve my score. And honestly, while the score against your peers is certainly important, and investors for sure take that into account, honestly, your score against yourself is one of the biggest. I'm just looking to improve my own score year over year. I want to get a little bit better. What's some places I can improve? And that's sort of how we took it at Greystar, was we looked at each individual fund. We tried to figure out what are the opportunities in this fund to improve against our own performance. And then, of course, we wanted to see how we compared against peers as well. But it is such a powerful framework to, like I said, to stay in between the lines, to be honest.
Dan, anything you would add to that from your end on, I know there was a huge revamp that we did on the scoring before, and while that was painful, it was also, though, we're continuing to move things forward. And so as people are maybe looking at their scores this year, looking into the next year, any thoughts or advice or things you would maybe point out to them? I loved Chris's couple comments too on compared to yourself, which I thought was great, but anything you'd add to that?
Well, so the first thing you're referring to is how we pulled the assessment apart last year, management and performance much more clearly, and scores dropped. Not everybody's, but a lot of them did. So the fact that they're coming back up is awesome. And we did that purposefully because what performance means in the past decade was, honestly, can you acquire the data? Or is the data getting better? Was there some like for like reduction over a trailing 2, 3, 4 year period? But those things start to fall off after organizations do, say, a lighting retrofit or whatever intervention that they're doing. So what does that mean for where we're going forward? For the decade ahead, it's really going to be about carbon counting. It's going to be where are we against the Paris Agreement? Other issues like climate risk and resiliency and whatnot are becoming more and more part of performance. So we've actually kicked off a global conversation with all of our members from Australia and Japan to the EU, Toronto, here in the US, Latin America. What does performance mean? We are seeing the emergence of net zero funds and net zero REITs. How did you do that? How did you get there? How can we recognize and reward that within our structure? Because it hadn't been set up that way in the past. So the good news is structured non-financial data, it's taken life, it's become a thing, and organizations are getting much better at it. So now it's all about what are the true real issues, and that's going to be carbon. You know, there's obviously other things that fall under the tent of ESG. I focus in on carbon because we have a difficult time here in the US counting it, putting a price on it. It's a negative externality, but let's face it, that's where everything is heading. So let's own it and let's count it and let's incorporate it. Chris brought up an interesting thing with the analogy of the coloring book. I have a slightly different one, which is GRESB is a bit like a golf course, right? You play against the golf course, but you are also playing against other golfers that are out there. So once you can get to maybe bogey golf or par golf or wherever it is for you, then you start to work on your putting. You work on your sand shots. You work on your driving, other elements of your game to keep improving and going forward. And then sometimes you might go play a harder course. So we do move the course a little bit, evolution, not revolution, but it does continue to drive progress. And that's how I think organizations should be thinking about GRESB.
Yeah. Well, let's not compare my ESG knowledge to my golf game, but I'll take it. Chris, sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, I was just agreeing. I really like that analogy. It's a great way of thinking about it because similarly in golf, you're playing against yourself and you are playing against the course. So it's a great analogy. I like that a lot. I may have to steal that from you.
Go ahead. No, there's no pride of ownership. One thing to point out though, when people, because you brought up the idea of 2022 and what that's like and when we should get started, right? So there's little milestone dates. One is one that Michelle brought up, which is when the submission deadline happens. Another one is today when the results come out. But GRESB, because it's this continual process that Chris pointed out, you know, there's no rest for the weary. It's always a moment to keep thinking about these issues. So on April 1st, when the portal opens up, people are confronted with the questions again and thinking about these issues. And on December 31st is really the key moment because that's when everything needs to be in place for when you go to talk about 2022, when April 1 happens. So to the extent that right now there's still 3 months in the calendar, this is a moment where people are saying, okay, where are the buildings that I don't have data? What can we put in place and what kind of conversations should I be having with property managers to elevate that? Are there some policies that we should think about maybe dusting off and revamping? What does our underwriting criteria look like? And does it include resiliency or climate data or other things? How can we improve the decisions that this organization is making? And the list continues. So don't let any particular date drive your ESG program. The ESG program is one of you know, it's a wash, rinse, repeat on an annual basis, but still it's a daily, weekly, monthly march to progress.
You know, to just add a little commentary to that too as well, Dan. The cool thing is, despite that we're talking about some advanced analytical analysis of things around like greenhouse gases, you know, that you mentioned, you know, Europe far ahead of the United States when it comes to that, or even North America. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is still the same data set. So those fundamentals that we put in place at the very beginnings of our sustainability programs become truly important as we start looking for, greenhouse gases is basically a combination of energy consumption and energy generation mix, right? So if you don't have the energy consumption, then it's very difficult to calculate your greenhouse gas impact. So these things continue to build on one another. And that's what I really like about GRESB is it really, even though we're getting more nimble and more, it evolves, right? But we're still we're not reinventing the wheel every time. We're just getting sharper and sharper, almost like the sharper knife in the kitchen gets the most work. It's sort of the same thing.
How many analogies can we use on this video?
I know, I love it. Well, I think this was great. And I think in terms of just, wrapping us up for today, any other, maybe we all end with just some like last minute advice for anyone that did get their results or is considering GRESB. I might actually throw out there first that we've been talking a lot about the GRESB results and what they mean and what they could look like. But for those that have never gone through with GRESB previously, I do highly suggest kind of like reading through all of the material that's going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks. I think more probably after October 15th or ish on those results, looking at those top performers, looking at the participants, and not also counting yourself out. Like you can still definitely get engaged, get started. You're not too late to like think about GRESB for next year. But really start utilizing it as a great, foundation, I think, for furthering an ESG journey. So I always find it about this time is when I get a lot of questions of like, am I too late? And it's like, you're not too late. We can still like, starting now gives you, I think one of you said, I can't remember who, but gives you the ability to look at your own performance against yourself year over year. You don't need to get like GRESB ready 2 years in advance. Like the whole point is to track your own progress. So that's absolutely still in play. So that would be my kind of parting thoughts with the GRESB results coming out today. Chris, I'll let you go next. Anything else you would give in terms of advice or something to be thinking about?
Staying on the theme of analogies, right? The longest journey begins with the first step. And honestly, that's the first step is starting to take a look at others, take a look at yourself, understand how sustainability aligns with your own organization, and then look at the leaders. I mean, there's sustainability reports that are out there, there's CSR reports that are out there, there's GRESB reports that are out there. And honestly, what's cool about the sustainability community, and even though I'm on the vendor side, I still consider my brothers and sisters in the director role, my peers. It's a close-knit community. We're all happy to help. So if you struggle, reach out. We're here for one another because it's going to take all of us to make a difference, to be honest.
It is one of my favorite things about this industry is that even though we're competitive, we're like, but we'll share. We want everyone to move forward. So I love that. Dan, final thoughts from you.
No, I love it. And Chris, I'm glad that you articulated it that way because it takes everybody to push collectively, all of us. And I just posted something on LinkedIn where that was the theme and spirit behind my observation. So it's often, how do I get started? What's my first step? So consider GRESB as this framework of best practices that is developed by the global industry and used by people in Japan and Singapore and Australia and the EU and the UK and here in America. So it's those best practices that have been developed by the industry for industry over a decade plus. And it's not about the score. It's easy for me to say because I'm right, but it's really not about the score. It is about, having that marker be in the sand where investors, if you will, don't like the behavior that they don't like to see is say you score a 17. Great. If you score a 17 in 2022 and a 19 in 2023 and a 22 in 2024, you're not taking it seriously. That's a bad day. If the 17 turns into a 34, that turns into a 51, that turns into a 68, that is strong. And that's what this is really meant to be. Anybody that you might look at that's a leader in GRESB right now has a trajectory that looks like that. Kilroy has been #1 in our assessment from a REIT standpoint for a long time. I don't know what the results are this year, but I only point to them because they've gotten a lot of accolades and they turned net zero a year ago. But 2012 or 13, when they first did the GRESB assessment, not a good score. But they used it as motivation internally to climb the ladder to get to #1. But there's another side of the coin. When they became #1, it's like, oh my gosh, we got to stay #1. Oh, no pressure, right? And so they have beehives on buildings. They went net zero. They became directed with their purchases for green electricity and those electrons from utility scale solar and wind. And that's what this is all about. So keep up the good work collectively, everybody, because we do need everybody to push.
I think that's the perfect way to end. Great parting statement. And this was great. I really appreciated, Chris, you joining us today. Thank you, Dan, of course, as always, for your time. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We appreciate the time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.